Hello! Welcome to the Baseball Insiders Prospect Show. I'm Adam Weinrib, joined by Eric Cole, as always, on Tuesday afternoon. Today's show is at 2 o'clock Eastern. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for being patient. Had to move the schedule around a little bit, and we knew we'd find you here, so we knew no problem. Typically at noon, though, is where you'll find us. If you want to know when we're going live, which is every Tuesday for the Prospect Show, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the Baseball Insiders with Robert Murray, this is exactly where you want to be. You want to turn on that notification bell so you know what's up and when we're going live. You can also find us in the Discord if you're not subscribed there. Highly recommend it. At either the Rumor Mill tier, where there's a private Robert Murray Q&A every Thursday at 3 Eastern, or at the All-Star tier. I hope all of our subscribers by now are subscribed to the Moonshot. That's our weekly baseball email newsletter where the Fansided MLB team, including Robert Murray, break down all the biggest stories in the big leagues and humor, insight, behind-the-scenes info. You can also read all of that and more on the Baseball Insiders feed on fansided.com/baseball-insiders, which is where you get Eric's prospect column, Eric's written component to the show. And today, that's all about the draft. We are doing a way too early draft buzz preview, and this is going to be a weird draft, and we will take your questions. Eric, thank you for helping me break it down, because I admittedly have not been as plugged in on this as I should be.
Well, look, it is very early, right? And we still have there's still baseball to be played. College World Series needs to sort itself out. And we've seen the draft get completely upended by what happens in the College World Series, workouts, all this other stuff. But at the same time, I'm excited to talk about the draft. It's less than 2 months away, which is kind of wild to me. And, it's like one of my favorite events in terms of like baseball tentpoles. If we're being honest with ourselves, probably the first 2 rounds are guys that people have gotten any amount of information on. And then it's for like the real kind of like tryhards and true sickos that are kind of looking into like what's happening in round 3 through 10 and then on day 3. But I enjoy all of it. It's a fascinating sort of process that these teams have to go for, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Me too. And this is, again, we are getting aligned on draft stuff because this is conference tournament week. So if you're into college baseball, at least the season is getting into postseason play. The College World Series and NCAA tournament is around the corner, but if you're, an ACC, SEC, Big Ten head, this is the week where all of that comes to a head. This will hopefully give you a guide to some players you should be watching as we get into the thick of draft season. Not quite, but we're on the corner, right? We're rounding the corner, looking at what's ahead as we get into the futures game, draft weekend, All-Star, all that good stuff. And Eric, probably most notably, the thing that stood out to you the most about this draft, and the thing that I think our viewers and listeners probably are latched onto, is that obviously baseball draft is hard to predict. You get a feeling for the, proclivities and preferences of all these various teams. You can only do so much legwork in guessing who's available at 12, who's going to get taken at 24. We have like a group of first round talents every year, but it stretches all the way to 48, 54, 62, and someone's going to go under slot. Like there's no way of knowing, but usually the very top of the draft is pretty solidified by now, by mid-June. And this year, that is not entirely the case. So what is standing out to you around the total lack of consensus around the top pick? There's obviously a holiday involved, and I think a lot of folks who watch the draft but don't, live and die by the ins and outs probably assume that Ethan Holiday has been the consensus number 1 for the last year, still is, and that won't change. What does the field look like right now, and how do you expect it to change less than 2 months out?
So there's a few things here. One is that this is kind of a strange class in the sense that whatever demographic you're kind of in, like that's what you would like to be, there is a top pick option available to you. If you want a college bat, you'd go with Ava. If you want to go with Arquette, if you want to go with a high school bat, Ethan Holiday, yes, Jackson's brother, Matt's son, more of a masher like his dad than like his brother. Then if you need a college arm, then you have Jamie Arnold. And then if you want a high school arm, you have Seth Hernandez. And those are just 4 names. You have other college bats like Jace LaViolette, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And Eli Willits, the high school bat from the shortstop. And then there's the what we'll talk about later is Liam Doyle, and whether or not you believe in his fastball and if it's kind of worth spending that kind of pick on. Again, it kind of comes down to what you want. And more importantly for me is for the Nationals, how are they going to use their bonus pool? Because if they just want the best player on the board, if you twist my arm right now, I'd probably say it's Ethan Holiday, but it's very close. but I also think he might be the most expensive of all those players, right? Like I don't know for certain, but at the same time, based on like how his brothers negotiations went, the fact that he has kind of all this pedigree, he's going to want real money to be hired, signed away from an actual college commitment. So do you go with a Jamie Arnold if you're the Nationals? Because one, you're very close to being a real contender. You have James Wood, you have Dylan Cruz, you have a real pitching staff. If you go and get a college lefty that will be up very soon and you will not look bad picking Jamie Arnold. He will give you a solid rotation guy. He has more upside than that, but his floor is kind of what brings him up to the top for me. Or if you want a guy that you can just have a project on and he might be the best prep arm we've seen in 2 or 3 years, and then you go with Seth Hernandez because he's this is a really live arm, but high school readies are really risky, and if you're betting a top pick on that, you want to get some real savings because then you can start signing some guys to overslot bonuses later on. So again, there's a lot of options available, and I think it's going to come down to money. A lot of people are still picking Ethan Holiday early, but everyone's acknowledging that the Nationals are kind of looking at all their options, and I think it'll end up coming down to something like a Jamie Arnold, maybe an Ava Arquette. I could see a world where they like cut a big discount and go and get Liam Doyle, just grab the guy who can throw 100 and has the best fastball in the draft, and then use the money to go, try to float someone down to the next pick. I could see that happening. A lot of options available to them. It's kind of fascinating.
Gotta be tempting too. The Orioles are a wagon with one wheel. Like they're a total mess right now. But to pair the Holiday brothers in the DMV would be kind of tempting and fun too. If Jackson's sticking around in Baltimore long term, Ethan in Washington, just, again, is that a real consideration? Probably not. But if Rob Manfred, if this were the NBA draft lottery, right? There are many ways you can rig it.
That's how you'd rig it. Yep.
Yeah. And so if Rob Manfred were stepping into the MLB draft, he would probably say something like, it might be fun to have the Holiday boys in that same area. I got to work on my Manfred. That kind of sucked. But you get the point. Again, a refresher for everybody. The Nationals have the first pick. Probably, and it's kind of an absurd draft order right now. I think the key reminders for everybody are that the Chicago White Sox set the record. Essentially, they were right there for worst season ever last year. And they don't pick in the top 9. They pick 10th because of the draft rule that shoves them down the board. And you can't have, the 2 clustered picks back-to-back years. Brutal. The Los Angeles Angels are second. And I think that's an easy one to overlook considering their draft history. They never seem to be atop the first round. And the Mariners are third. We have a first-place team in the AL West picking third in this year's draft. An absurd win, much the same way the Guardians jumped up the board last year for Travis Bazzana. Here are the Mariners and the St. Louis Cardinals, who, if anybody's been watching the Cardinals lately, they look like a potential postseason contender, happen to be picking 5th 1 year after selecting J.J. Weatherholt at the top of the first round. So if you're angry about Cardinals devil magic, you're pre-upset, there's a reason to be mad because the Chicago White Sox can't pick high back-to-back years, but the Cardinals end up getting maybe the consensus top talent of last year's draft. And then also they pick 5th this year. So again, if you're bothered, we hear you. We get it. But for everybody asking who the White Sox are going to pick, they select 10th for whatever reason. So they're going to have to collect some fallout from this whole situation, or maybe they're hoping a wild card drops. And I know you already touched on Liam Doyle and his 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Baseball fans who are confused about where to turn as the conference tournaments begin should probably watch the SEC and Tennessee and Doyle. You have him as basically the number 1 wild card in the draft right now.
Yeah, and it's a true wild card, right? Because look, the fastball's extraordinarily good. It's plus at least. High 90s, hits touches triple digits, has a lot of spin, a lot of ride. You just can't, if you swing at it, you can't hit it when it's at the top of the zone. It's just full stop. You can't do it. But his secondaries, they're fine, but they're not anywhere close to that pitch. And again, maybe it's almost too much separation where you kind of know right away that you're getting the breaking stuff as opposed to his heater. The strikeout numbers have been insane at Tennessee this year for him. Really good year. I think there's real reliever risk with him, and he's a high effort guy, but this is the kind of high ceiling arm that's also a college arm. Again, if you're a team the easiest example here is the Angels because all they do is draft college guys and then promote them within 3 months. But if you're a team that needs help right now in your bullpen, Liam Doyle is probably going to be one of your better bullpen arms, right? The only question is just how high of a pick would you want to blow on a guy like that when, again, there's enough effort in his delivery, and it's like really violent. Like he is trying to blow his pitches past everyone. Do you spend a top 10 pick on that? Right now, it seems like the answer is yes. Now, there was like some discussion of like, maybe he's in the conversation for number 1 overall. I think that's a bit much, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked in the top 5. I think it's very likely that he gets picked in the top 10. But if he struggles in the SEC tournament, or he leaves, with arm soreness, or like the command wanes, anything like that, velocity drops, I could see him going at the bottom of the first round. It's just, it can be all over the place for this guy. The talent is insane, but there's enough things that are like red flags for teams that if like the conference tournament doesn't go well, or like something comes up in physicals, or maybe even in the interviews, like it's almost like they would want to find a reason to pick someone else because he is such a volatile commodity. But again, I think he's going to get picked in the top 10. And I think that the team that does that is going to get the best pitch in the draft, which is his fastball. It's just whether or not the other stuff is good enough, and whether or not he ends up being a reliever. I mean, again, if he ends up being a shutdown reliever for you, that's not like a bad outcome. But at the same time, if you're picking in the top 10, you're probably letting a starter.
And remember, for all the viewers and listeners, that's kind of what happened last year. Not dogging on Chase Burns at all, but how long did we spend just debating, Bazan or Condon, number 1, number 2, like which one do you grab? And then whoever doesn't get one gets the other. And then the Reds go off the board, get the top fastball. And Burns has looked great at the pro level. And Condon has had under 30 at-bats and is injured and is sort of forgotten on the Colorado Rockies at this point. And Bazan went down today with an oblique, and he'll be shut down for 8 to 10 weeks because they're careful. So that's none of this is to say that the Guardians made a mistake at top of the draft last year. But it is to remind everyone that, hey, maybe somebody at the top falls in love with the top tool, like an absurd fastball, and maybe they just want to go collegiate pitcher is more appealing than collegiate slugger. And so far, we don't have a lot of data on Condon. We don't really know what he is or what he'll ever be. So that somebody could fall in love with a tool like that, and it might not even look that ridiculous down the line. Are there any players who, again, almost impossible to diagnose because we're getting to the bottom of the first round. There's not often a whole lot of difference between the 17th ranked player in a draft and the 54th. Like anybody there's a reason why so many second rounders pop. There's a reason why you look back and go, Freddie Freeman, the 41 teams passed on Freddie Freeman. Like, yep. I mean, that's the kind of thing that goes down in the MLB draft. There are not a lot of Tony Parker level shockers. It's not like only the Spurs knew about this point guard from France. It's like there are a lot of players with comparable talent, and then it comes down to coaching and need and fit and what have you. But anybody who theoretically is ranked towards the bottom of the first round, maybe ranked in the comp round or early second in terms of projections, who you really believe in and you feel like is a sleeper who we could see, whether or not they rise up draft boards, making a big impact as soon as they hit pro ball?
Yeah, I have a couple. One is a guy who, honestly, if he was healthy, he'd be top 15, top 20 pick, and that's Max Bellew. Out of Texas, again, was one of the better hitters in college baseball. The problem is that he hurt his thumb. He's been out since March, and that's going to hurt his stock. And right now you see him kind of ranked in the 30s, 40s. Maybe he kind of gets picked in the top of the second round. But I think that the team that gets him is getting a steal. And he might recommend an overslot type situation because he's that good of a hitter. I mean, again, you look at a guy like, some of these college hitters that are going to be taken in the middle of the first round, Brendan Summerhill, a couple of those other guys. I don't see much appreciably different output-wise in terms of what Bellew, I think, is going to do as a pro than a lot of these other guys. Now, he's not as good as Dave Arquette. He's not all this other stuff. So all these other guys kind of at the top. But, again, when you get a middle of the first round talent, potentially in the second round, seems like a not a deal breaker to me. And again, in the second round, might cost a little bit of money, but I think there's going to be a lot of people competing for his services, unless there's something more to this thumb injury that is going to really impact his ability to throw or swing a bat or something like that. And we just don't know that right now. I'm actually going to go a lot further down the board. Again, there's like a guy like a Cam Leiter who's been hurt. I like his fastball a lot. The stuff's good. Jack Leiter's cousin, and there's certainly some bloodlines there that would make you feel like he could play, but again, has been hurt. I'm going to go with William Patrick. This is the high school bat that I've been kind of enamored with for a while now. 6'2", 200 pounds, and he's a tool shed. Full stop. It's a 70 runner and can hit the ball 420 feet. But again, he's raw. He's like from a small, let's see, I think a small school in Louisiana, I think is where it is. Yeah, St. Frederick High School in Monroe, Louisiana. So this isn't a guy who has seen as much of the showcase circuit as you would like. Maybe not. It doesn't have a lot of looks against the top guys as you'd like. But in terms of like pure physical tools, he kind of smells a little like a Mike Trout type physical mutant to me. It's just that he can do anything on the field. Will he do that? I don't know. And I think that he may be expensive. I can't remember exactly where his commitment is. I believe it. I mean, if he's from Louisiana, it's almost certainly LSU. It is.
Yeah.
Again, that's a hard commitment to buy a kid out of, especially if he's not immediately getting first round money. But I could see a team that has money on the Nationals or one of these other big bonus pool teams that saved money with those early picks, throwing a bunch of money at William Patrick and again, you're putting him as a project. He's going to take some time, but there's enough to bet on with him that I would be very interested in kind of making that pick and making that bet.
And if he's from Louisiana, odds are it's an LSU commitment. If he's from the Air Force Academy, odds are it's an LSU commitment. They gobble up everybody these days. But
Vandy, yeah,
Vandy too. Good to keep an eye on him early down the board, and obviously good to keep an eye on the teams at the top of the draft. This will not be our final draft preview. We'll hear from us plenty as things begin to clarify, but some names to watch heading into the collegiate postseason and the end of the high school schedule. Thank you everybody for joining us, and again, get your questions in. We are happy to answer them now. Let's head into the previous week's action. The risers and fallers from the last week of minor league action before the games get started again today on Tuesday. That's why we do the show on Tuesday. Recap the previous week, roll into the next one. Eric, anybody stand out to you from the pro ranks this week? I will also add, I went to Somerset over the weekend, got a live look at George Lombard Jr., watched the final Justinson Garcia game before he got called up to AAA, and I will say, that guy is an adult man, and it does not surprise me at all that he's headed to the top levels of the minors. His frame stands out. Lombard Jr. didn't do much, but Garcia is a wrecking ball. So, yeah, good luck with Worcester. Anybody stand out to you as last week's risers?
Yeah, Garcia's a fun physical specimen. I kind of wish I'd been able to see him. I haven't had a chance to see him live. So we do have 3 names. I'm trying to go with new names. Again, a lot of the usual suspects are kind of continuing to do their thing. Along the lines, if you want to be excited, Leo DeVries is a pretty good name to kind of look at his stats every week because he's kind of insane. But a few new names for the risers this week. One is first baseman Jonathan Long from the Cubs organization. Again, he had a good year offensively last year, looked good in the Arizona Fall League this year. The problem with him in terms of his prospect stock is he's really, really going to have to hit because he's first base or DH only. He's not. You can't put him in the field anywhere else. I mean, I know there's been some discussion that maybe trying to get him into the right field or something, but that to me seems objectively insane. But last week, 12 for 22, 2 doubles, 2 triples, a homer. He even stole a base, which is frankly kind of funny considering when you see him run. But again, drove in 10 runs. Really good hitter. I like him a lot. And I think that the Cubs are in a really good spot right now where they can kind of start. They promoted Matt Shaw back this past week. Then they have enough talent coming to kind of supplement this core roster that seems to be playing really well right now. I really kind of like where the Cubs sit at the moment. The next is Connor Burns. So I feel very strongly that catchers need a long time in the minor leagues because they have the hardest job. I think that learning how to call games, and, even especially if you have to transition to being a one-knee catcher and calling games by yourself when you hadn't done so previously, it's something that takes a lot of reps. Burns has been one of the guys defensively that I would feel comfortable promoting relatively quickly because he's that good at it. He's a very good defensive catcher. The problem is that he is truly awful at the plate. Awful. And he has been. And if he had even been passable in the minor leagues, he would have already been in the big leagues. He's just the defensive acumen is that good. But last week, 7 for 20, 4 home runs. Again, still 8 strikeouts, so work in progress there. But at the same time, this is a guy who can, if he even looks like he could hit 240, he's going to be in the big leagues, or he's going to get traded to someone who wants him because he could catch in the big leagues right now. The last guy is Patrick Copen. I know it comes as a shock to you, but finally the Dodgers had something go right for them.
What?
Yeah, I know. 2 starts last week, almost 14 innings pitched, give up 2 runs total and 18 strikeouts. Yeah, it kind of looks like they got just another guy that's that can pitch really well. He's a power fastball slider guy. Again, there's some reliever risk with any of these guys who throw this hard. He's upper 90s fastball type guys, but he throws enough strikes right now that it feels like he could be a starter. My only concern with him is that he's kind of one of those, instead of a changeup, he has a cutter, which will help him against lefties. But I really kind of like having the changeup as kind of a change of speed type thing when you're kind of a power guy, right? Like as opposed to a cutter, which will be slower than your four seam, but not by as much as I would like. I'd like to have something a little bit more separation. I wish he had a better changeup, but he doesn't. And so those are my riders.
Reliever risk. I mean, can we get him to Los Angeles this week? Like they could use somebody to take innings 4 through 7 and also 1 through 3 and also maybe 8, 9 wouldn't hurt. So
yeah, they could use some arms for sure. And I don't think they'll be that quick with this particular one, but they have some guys that they might, or probably just should give an opportunity, considering that they don't really have any other options right now because they all keep getting hurt.
Yeah, I reviewed the tape, and it actually seems like the Dodgers are struggling on the mound right now. I reviewed some more tape, too. It seems like Juan Soto wasn't running as hard as he could have out of the box yesterday on that single off the monster. I don't know. I'll have to watch it again, but definitely seems like maybe some conflicting opinions there.
I mean, he asked everyone to watch, so.
Yeah, he said, I mean, look, again, he asked me to. I did it, and then I watched, and I don't think he was running very fast. But we'll agree to disagree. $765 million Juan Soto. How about any fallers from last week? Obviously Juan Soto, and then 2 more prospects that you wanted to talk about.
Sure. First one is, again, just a weak blip, and that's Max Clark. The guy's hitting 230. I mean, the guy's hitting like 290, walking a ton, getting on base. I wish the power was showing up a little bit more this year, but again, that's like a small quibble, and that's going to be kind of the part of his game that comes last, because he's just kind of right now, he's a very strong guy, but he's kind of a speed contact, sort of like focusing on his hit tool and running around the bases like his hair's on fire. I expect him to get stronger as he gets older, but last week only 3 hits. Was kind of pedestrian. But again, he's still, even after what would a subpar week for him, he's still hitting like 287 or 290 or something like that. I expect him to get promoted soon. He's really good. The other one's Robbie Snelling, old friend of Padres, now with the Marlins, because he got traded over in the Tanner Scott trade with Brian Hoeing as well. He was better after the trade last year with the Marlins, which is good. He kind of has been a guy that was like ranked in the Padres system relatively highly, but the results weren't really there last year. And then he got trades to Miami, and again, much better, like kind of I think like a 3 ERA guy, not ready for the big leagues, but kind of like it seems like he figured something out. This year, it's like a 5.57 ERA, and he gave up 5 runs in his last start. So I wonder a little bit if he's just not going to get there in terms of Snelling. And the Padres have been pretty good of identifying the guys, even if they're ranked high or like experts have liked them for whatever reason. They know what they want, and again, they're willing to cut bait with those guys. And I think that's what happened with Snelling. I think that they realized that he wasn't going to be a guy that they were going to factor into his future, and they decided to ship him off when they could.
Yeah, and that was a large package that we fixated on at last year's deadline, and it turns out to be, again, how many of these trades you just sort of wash your hands on both sides? Tanner Scott gone, Robbie Snelling struggling, and you're like, I guess maybe made too big a deal out of that overpay, and now Tanner Scott's a Dodger. Although, again, the Dodgers, if you are healthy and in the Los Angeles general area, please give the Los Angeles Dodgers a call. They could use you either at the back end, front end, or in the middle innings. So give them a ring. One final thing we wanted to touch on before we sign off. I've talked a lot about how the Red Sox are going to manage to get Roman Anthony to the big leagues. And some of that discourse forgets Marcelo. And here he is, maybe factoring in at second base, given that the Red Sox are down a first baseman all year, relying on Abraham Toro, who not a first baseman himself. Abraham Toro is like a third baseman, second baseman, but he's their current starting first baseman. Robert Murray on the show yesterday mentioned Dom Smith. And hey, that's a possibility. He's raking for the Yankees at AAA, familiar name in Boston. Maybe he pops in until the trade deadline and they can upgrade with a Nathaniel Lowe or something of that nature. But we saw Kristian Campbell working out. Kristian Campbell brought his first base glove to the Fenway Park yesterday. Didn't play in the game, didn't start, but still made mention of one of the positions I've never covered. Here's my new glove, what have you. What are the odds that soon, before too long, we get a little Campbell at first, Marcelo Mayer at second base action for the Boston Red Sox?
So my confidence level is relatively high that we will see Campbell at first base because they frankly just don't have any other options right now. I don't have any idea how Boston's going to handle this because, again, if you put Kristian Campbell at first base, it's kind of a waste. You know, he actually does have some defensive ability if you put him in like his better positions. And if you put him at first base, you really have to kind of hope that his bat comes around, and it's been a bit hit and miss lately. no pun intended. And it's a weird situation with Devers, and with what happened with Bregman came over, and now Casas is hurt. I mean, Campbell's also banged up, which is kind of another problem. I'd almost prefer them just have Roman Anthony make some starts at first base down in the minor leagues at this point. Considering everything that's happened to them, like, why would you not just give him some starts at first base, get in and get his foot in the door, let him hit, because he's raking down there right now. And as for Marcelo, again, he's a good defensive shortstop. You really want to put him at second base? I don't really understand kind of what they are supposed. I don't actually know what they're supposed to do in this situation, because they have too many outfielders. Their infield's a mess, and it's by their own making. And then they have these three prospects where in an ideal world, you have all three of them on the field right now based purely on merit. I think that what we're going to see is Kristian Campbell gets a couple starts at first base, and we'll see how it goes. If that happens and he performs well over there, I can see Marcelo being up relatively soon. He seems to make the most sense in this alignment, but he's also not the most deserving of those two guys. Roman Anthony deserves to be up, right? And then what do you do there? You already don't have playing time for Masataka Yoshida, and you just locked him in a basement somewhere and told him he's hurt. Well, actually, that's not true. I guess that we did see that he actually looks pretty hurt. So
he can't throw, but he could hit. He could hit all spring. He homered all spring, but he is clearly in pain.
Yeah, he is certainly banged up. Maybe another guy has to get banged up for Roman Anthony to get a chance. I don't understand what the Red Sox are thinking, unless it's purely a service time thing. If they're just no, we want to hold him down as long as possible, and so that way we can get this guy for as long as possible and buy ourselves some more time. Maybe before the trade deadline something happens. But yeah, it's a weird situation to be sure. And I think that the most likely part of that equation is that Kristian Campbell's at first base, because again, Abraham Toro, not a guy that you want at first base on a team that's wanting to contend for a playoff spot. But after that, it gets a little dicey for me.
Kristian Campbell also absurdly talented and going through the first rough patch of his major league career right now too. So if you're talking about when do we want to disrupt this person's routine and give him a new position, it's not when they're down under 100 OPS plus and suddenly worth negative 0.1 WAR on the year after starting off so hot and being so talented. You're you're compounding a slump by saying, now can you do us a real solid and cover first base? Campbell, I believe, would do it. He's clearly prepared to, but it's just an odd confluence, and not when you want to have to make that call out of necessity. Well, Eric, fun show, good show, and we didn't even get to touch on Jack Caglione getting the bump to AAA. We will
give it a couple weeks. We've given it a couple weeks. We'll have another promotion of his to talk about.
Yeah,
he's a bad dude.
That's what I was going to say. We're not talking about him going to the Storm Chasers. We'll talk about him going to the Royals around the All-Star break. We appreciate everybody tuning in. You will see us again next Tuesday at noon Eastern time for the Baseball Insiders Prospect Show. Again, subscribe to the Moonshot if you have not. Fansided.com/baseball-insiders if you have not. Eric's column is there. I wrote some weird stuff. Robert Murray writes his weekly notes, and he writes plenty. Every column Robert writes goes right there. So if you're a Robert Murray fan, that's where you go to read his work, his own Twitter feed too. Turn notifications on for Robert. He'll keep breaking stuff. Join us in the Discord. Rumor Mill tier or All-Star tier. Just hit the join button below this YouTube video. We'll see you right in there. Subscribe here. You can join us on tomorrow's show, on Friday's show, then looping around holiday next Monday, but we'll be back on Wednesday. We are back so much, folks, and you'll know exactly when we are back by hitting us up on this channel, subscribing, and turning your notifications on. Until next time, I'm Adam Weinrib for Eric Cole. Take care, everybody.